Welcome to Growth Minded Conversations. We're your hosts, Amy Dieselkamp and Paula Grimes from Growth Minded Talent Solutions, where we talk about the real leadership and hiring decisions behind building a growing business.
Welcome to Growth Minded Conversations, everyone. I'm Paula Grimes, and I'm here today with my business partner, Alyssa Kopp. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, good to see you guys.
We're going to talk about ownership today. We're not talking about real estate ownership. We're talking about ownership of your job. What does that look like? How do we nurture it in our employees? Why is it important? So, Alyssa, how would you define ownership?
For me in a job, ownership truly is taking responsibility for not just your daily responsibilities. It goes deeper than that. It truly is being able to see what you need to get done on a daily basis, but also being able to anticipate potential challenges or potential needs of not just yourself, but also your team. It is also part of being able to take responsibility if there is a mistake and learn from it and then find that solution so it doesn't happen again. And it's really taking that initiative on your own without necessarily having to be told by somebody to do that.
Yes. It's not just being in a job and you're just there to get the tasks done. It's actually a mindset shift where you're acting like you're a business owner.
Yeah,
Like
you're invested.
Yes, you're invested. Exactly. Let's talk about why. Why do we want our employees to have ownership?
I think it comes back to that kind of investment in the business. It creates that sense of culture that you want to grow with the business. You want to see the business be successful because if the business is successful, that means each individual team member is successful. Having ownership within your job as well really creates that confidence and trust that everybody typically wants to have within their team. And you can really rely on your team that it's not just you that's trying to move the business forward.
Yes. I think, Alyssa, it's not just you. When the people around you don't have ownership in the role they're playing in the business, I feel like all that ownership is on your shoulders. So
Yeah.
you actually own the result of everything. And that is really a heavy lift. It's exhausting to hold that.
Yeah. It can feel isolating when it's you in that position. And I do think taking ownership really does help cultivate the right culture for the team, which is good for everybody.
Yeah. So has ownership looked for you, or what has ownership looked like in the roles that you've been in the past?
Yeah. So, as an executive assistant, when I first started in real estate, it was a lot of really having to figure it out as we went, kind of that sink or swim moment of it was a lot of things that maybe I hadn't done before, but it was, you know what? I this is the direction the team is headed in. I need to figure this out so that everyone else on the team can really thrive and focus on what they needed to focus on. As I grew within that role into the director of operations, there it was not just holding myself accountable, it was also trying to help my team hold themselves accountable and really having that forward thinking. That's really where the anticipation and kind of trying to forward think came into my role in my ownership was okay, not only am I managing and have my own daily tasks, but we've got to guide this ship and make sure that we're getting 1% better every day. How do we make that happen and what needs to go on so that we are continuing to get better?
Did you ever have somebody who was not taking ownership of their position?
You know, it happens It does happen all the time, unfortunately. At the same time, it was a lot of good learning lessons for a lot of people. When I did recognize that our team member was not taking ownership, there were a lot of different signs that came to me. Things were falling through the cracks. And I couldn't see the direct reason why. Usually on our team, our systems were pretty buttoned up. So if something was falling through the cracks, it was because there was a very clear gap that somehow we had missed, or it was exactly that someone wasn't taking ownership. They weren't being accountable to what they were supposed to be doing. And when I would have those tough conversations, or we would have the conversation about what happened, there wasn't, to me, a super logical reason. And that's what really led us to realize, okay, we need to sit down and have a more serious conversation about ownership of the role and the accountability that comes along with that.
Were you able to get that person to step into that? Or was this they chose not to step into it and you had to part ways type of situation?
Yeah, so I've been in both of those situations before, a team member who absolutely stepped into it. I think having that deeper conversation around ownership and what it meant for our team really helped clarify for them and give them a good picture of, okay, I totally get what you mean. I can do that and I want to build that skill. And so having the conversation and bringing it to light and actually talking about it and not just expecting it really helped them. On the other side, I have been in a situation where they say they're going to do it, but do you really see that in action? And that is a tough situation, right? It's having those hard conversations, which you guys have talked about on the podcast before, but it is something that you do need to address quickly, because the more that you let it fall through, the more that it will affect the business long term, and the more you have to take on, right? Whether you're the direct manager or someone else has to take on those responsibilities. It felt like I ended up micromanaging them, and I didn't like that feeling, and I'm sure they didn't enjoy it either.
So, if you could put the culture of ownership, if you were explaining this to your team, we have a culture of ownership. What buckets would you pick to put that culture into? Meaning, how would you break it down for them so they understood what that meant?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me of the buckets is really kind of taking that initiative or being proactive, right? That forward thinking that I mentioned before. How do we do that? Always being a priority, looking forward, and if you see something, taking action on that or bringing it to the right person's attention. It's having that self accountability for sure. As an outside person, right, or a third party person, you can only hold people accountable so much. Accountability really comes internally. So, really kind of having that internal feeling of, I want to do well, I want the team to succeed, right? Having that internal accountability. I want to pull my own weight on the team, right? If everybody's pulling their own weight, we all succeed, but you have to do that from internal. And then truly, I think it comes down to empowerment, and having that ownership really does it, kind of like the trust and confidence again, right? Everyone knows that they can rely on you, and you know that you can rely on your team. So it is that feeling of empowerment and that autonomy that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing at the level they're supposed to be doing it at.
Let's talk about autonomy for a minute, because autonomy means that we can work independently. We can make decisions that are appropriate for our position, right? We don't need somebody watching us over our shoulder. We don't need somebody making all the decisions for us, which also means we shouldn't be running to the people above us asking for permission for everything all the time.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
finding that balance of knowing when to ask permission for something and when you have the authority to make this decision and you need to move this forward.
I've always liked the analogy or the visual of the lanes and everybody has their own lane on the team. And there are times where you need to not step into somebody else's lane, but you may need to bring them into yours. The first example that comes to mind for me is transaction coordination, right? You want your transaction coordinator to feel so confident to be able to make decisions when things are happening. And there are certain times when they should absolutely be pulling the agent in for assistance or guidance, right? Or advice on how do we handle this potential fire. And so it really is, like you're saying, it's that delicate balance of being able to move forward on your own without always having to ask permission, but also knowing when is the right time to pull somebody else into the situation.
And if you need help with this, we did a previous podcast around the decision tree, which is a model that will help you have those conversations of what decisions are appropriate to make in somebody's position and what aren't, what decisions need to be made by somebody above them.
Yeah. And I think that can be really helpful. I think sometimes that's a miss when it comes to ownership is when are those exceptions that you should be pulling people in and not just making an executive decision on your own and really defining that as much as you can when you're bringing someone new onto the team, right? Or you're in a new situation saying, okay, great, this is the first time we ran into this. Let's intentionally say if this ever happens again, you do bring me in or bring me in sooner.
Mistakes are okay. We are human beings, all of us make them. And when we make a mistake, we should own it and we should have some sort of learning from that mistake.
Yeah.
Often the mistake shows us a gap in our systems. And so we need to go back to our system and modify our system so that mistake never happens again.
Yeah.
So there's ownership in all of that. And as a leader, the only way that can happen is if we make mistakes part of a learning process and not belittle people because they've made mistake or not make it unforgivable if a mistake is made. With that being said, the same mistake being made over and over again, there is a problem with that, right? And that's not
Yeah.
a systems problem, that becomes a people problem when the same mistake keeps happening. Because once it's happened once, we should have learned enough from it that we've fixed whatever caused it, like the underlying foundation.
We always want to be learning from the mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Mistakes are going to happen. So it gives you the competitive advantage that, okay, I just learned something new that I didn't before, right? Or I just experienced something new that we hadn't before. That builds you up, right? And again, it gives you the opportunity to take ownership moving forward.
Is there any further advice you would give to somebody who wants to create ownership on their team where everybody owns their role and how their role performs?
Yeah, I think going back to those buckets, Paula, the anticipating problems, being proactive, the accountability, that empowerment, those make a lot of sense to me. I would say definitely defining it for your team, right? What does ownership mean to you guys? And really just having the conversation. I think a lot of times when people are confident in their roles, they just assume that ownership is going to be taken. I think having the intentional conversation around it and really defining what it is for your team can be really beneficial.
100%. And I think we'll end the podcast with this. Assume that people will naturally own a role. Don't assume that they understand what ownership is. Definitely have the conversation. If they're already of that mindset, they're not going to mind having the conversation and they're going to love hearing that's what you also expect. And if there's any trepidation on their end of stepping into that, you've taken the trepidation away because you've shared with them what your expectations are around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today, Alyssa. We'll see everyone in the next Growth Minded podcast. All right, Growth Minded leaders, that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope this sparked some fresh ideas and fueled your drive to build, lead, and grow with purpose. And if something we shared helped shift your perspective, we'd love for you to leave a review. It helps us reach more business builders just like you. Better yet, share this with someone on your team or in your inner circle who's ready to level up their leadership game. Until next time, keep leading boldly, hiring wisely, and training with intention.